Okay, so we're now ready to make the second layer of water movement, the ripples that are going to go on top of this underlying sort of wave roll pattern. Okay, so at this point we're going to basically base it all off of this initial pixel processor function that we created. So I'm just going to Control C, Control V, make a copy, sort of get rid of that connection. And what I end up with here is that same formula, so it just saves me from having to redo the whole thing. And we're just going to change this according to our needs, but it's going to be the same basic idea that we're going to be building off of. Now, before we get any further, I want to take a look at the noise library. There are some incredible noises that just come with, and I mean, these are great, and the other great thing about them is that you can kind of use them. You reverse engineer them to learn about how to make these things. So it's really worth taking the time to look. I'm looking for fluid. That's would be somewhere in here. Okay, so these are the two noises that I used for the water. And the great thing about a lot of these, I mean, they're all different, but a lot of them you can expose. They have their own instance parameters, which can also be exposed so that you can use them in your material that you're making and actually have them be manipulated, or you can also manipulated by the end user, or you can also make a new function for them. Woohoo! So there is a lot of utility here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do before, just to show how this is done, and it's something we're going to end up doing later, is that I think I mentioned in the previous video that sort of the underlying theorem behind doing all of this is that you're trying to have everything move just a little bit different from everything else. So it doesn't, you don't want it too crazy, but it's all kind of moving in the same direction, but then kind of it's not. One of the great things about this is that you can actually animate the flow of the well, I can't remember. Let's pull out the this really irritating thing here. Let's make it a little bit bigger. All right, so this is our 2D view. Now we can actually get this material to do this all on its own. This is all built in. Now, if we went to just expose this function, which we could do, and it'll give you the option of using an input or a function that you've already made, or you can just go ahead and create a new parameter that use a parameter that you have already made, or you can go ahead and create a new one. We're not going to do that. Well, no, let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll publish it out, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so let's just make a new one. So we're going to do flow, right? And we hit OK. Now, you'll notice that in here, all of a sudden, this slider disappeared because this slider is no longer controllable from here. Because it's an exposed function, the only way you're going to get to it is by double-clicking on the main graph, and you now see that this flow has been added to the input parameters for the graph as a whole. So when it's just an input parameter for this particular material, then you can adjust it here. If you've exposed it, then it becomes it's only sort of adjustable through the main parameters. Now, one of the things I noticed is that it doesn't automatically create a label when you just expose it like that. So generally, when I do exposed parameters, I will make I'll make my own parameters first, and then instead of just doing new from here, I'll have already made a new parameter here the way I want it, and I'll just get it from that drop-down list. So let's just add flow to the label, and that'll do us. And then just for now, just to see what it does, we're just going to hook it up to the color and leave everything else alone. And we can go ahead and publish this out. And see what happens. Okay, so now we've got this flow exposed here, and what we were doing in there, we can do here. However, this is not animated. So if you go ahead and play it, that underlying animation that we already had, yeah, that's working great, but these things are just sitting here. And we are going to animate what we make out of this noise map. We're going to go ahead and animate that, but what we're also going to do is we are going to add extra movement in here. I'm just doing Control Z, and that just backspaces it, or you could undo it and redo it. But by adding a little bit of extra movement here, it's going to help break up the pattern, but we're going to have it move really slow. So we don't want it flowing so quickly that, you know, it looks like the water is moving. But if you have it moving ever so slowly, as the wave that we, you know, this wave function that is sort of making these sort of arcs with the material, as it's doing that, every time it moves through an arc, these guys are in a slightly different spot. So it actually it's good. It works well. So okay, so let's instead of just exposing it like that, we're going to clear this, and that will, again, that'll have it back in here because we've just cleared out the function, and it takes it away from, I don't know if it's still, is it still here? No, it's okay. So you would have to, if you want to get rid of it altogether, you have to delete the variable right there. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to create an empty function. Except, yeah, okay. In order to edit it, you just click back on that thing. And now we have this new graph with flow from fluid. And this is going to be very simple. We want this to move over time. So it's going to take over just moving that slider back and forth for us. So we're going to add a node, variables, get float, double click that. We're going to put $time. And we don't want it to go really fast. So we are going to multiply it by a smaller number. I'm putting a constant in here because I kind of already know what I want that number to be. But again, you can feel free to experiment and see, you know, maybe you're doing a stream and you want something with a little bit more directionality to it. You know, create a temporary variable, fool around with it, and once you've decided what you want that to be, you can always just set it as a constant or keep it as a variable, whatever you want. And then there's no, because this isn't pixel processor, so we're not actually, we don't have to sample out pixels here. So all we need to do is right click on this, and we can set that as the output node, and that will, that's the entirety of the function that we're going to use for the flow. All right, so now we can go back to the main graph. And this has been exposed with the function that we put in there. So it's got that built in now. So we can plug this into this pixel processor, which has got that original thing that we made here. And now we can start expanding on this and making it, again, a little bit different. So let's just take a, well, let's take a look and see what this does for us just from the color, so we can get an idea of, oops, can get an idea of what it looks like. Let's take a look. Okay. So now it's swinging and these little guys are moving all at the same time. So these little guys are moving forward and at the same time it's making that parabolic arc or whatever kind of arc it's making. So this gives us an extra layer of sort of randomness, or at least apparent randomness. Okay, so we're going to follow the same formula, except now we are going to change it somewhat. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to change sort of the amplitude and the frequency, because the little ripples on top are moving at a different speed, because those tend to be generated by wind, whereas the ones underneath are more current. I mean, not necessarily, but pretty much. So let's make a couple of new parameters. And we can, again, it's going to be an amplitude and a frequency, because basically we're going to take those variables and we're going to switch them out. So we're going to have an amplitude for ripples. And again, it's a float 1. For now, we'll leave it at 1, 1, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be smaller than that. And we're going to call it amplitude, and the group will be ripples. And then we can do the same thing for frequency. Where am I? There. So frequency ripples, frequency, and ripples. Okay, and we'll leave the defaults as it. Actually, well, let's, you know what? Let's put these at like 0.5, because otherwise it's going to be a little crazy. Okay, so we have those set up. So all we need to do is go back into our pixel processor, and we're just going to switch these out. So again, I'm going to highlight this one, and so amplitude, I'm going to do amplitude ripples, and frequency, I'm going to do frequency ripples. Okay, so we've already changed what's going on as far as how this is affecting our map. So let's publish this out. Ooh, you know what we forgot to do? We forgot to do this. Oh, no, let's do that because we still haven't hooked it up to anything else. Let's take a look at it like this for now. Oh, we gotta play it. Okay. So you can see that it's actually moving a lot faster now than that underlying current. And it's moving forward a little bit. So it's kind of going in the arc, and then at the same time they're moving forward. So it's never really stopping. So I'm liking that. We'll probably need to adjust the amplitude and the frequency, but for now it's fine. We already know, actually it's the top one that's, so let's recreate what's going on here with the normals now that we did with the height map and the, yeah, well, we're not really doing the color yet. So let's just get rid of this. We'll put this back. And so let's actually start making it look like ripples. So we're going to get another normal from here. It's going to have a blur on it. So you know what? We might as well put that in now. That's probably too much. I ended up making this blur a variable in the end after messing around with it for a while, because what it ends up doing is giving you either sort of more blurry or sharp. You know, sometimes ripples are really sharp and sometimes they're not. So I kind of decided to leave that variability in there. This looks pretty good for now. And so we plug that into our normal, and it will automatically put in a grayscale conversion for you if that's like the only choice. But if, you know, some of these, you'll notice some of these nodes have an either or. So if you look at these closely, some of them will accept either grayscale or color. And if that's the case, then you have to manually put in that grayscale conversion. However, the normal map will only accept a grayscale. So it will automatically put that in there because it just knows that that's what needs to happen. So I'm pressing the D key to dock it. You see that's calculating. We don't know if we're going to put a blur on there yet, but now we're going to have to blend the ripples. We kind of got that backwards. Well, anyway, I'm kind of a bit of a neat freak. So, but this is going to, these ripples want to be on top of this stuff. So we'll leave this as our final sort of blend there. And we're going to have to put another blend node in here, which will take the result of the ripple, because we're going to have, just like we did with these guys, we're going to have two of these. So we're going to take that result and then we're going to blend the two of them together. So for now it's well, I mean, we could just put it in. No, we can't just put it in there. So let's do this. Oh, and we forgot to change our normal map to fill alpha with input and OpenGL. And so this now gives us an alpha where there's no bump. And we're going to put that on top of that. And so this way, we don't have to put a mask in here because it's already done it for us in here. And what we're left with is the result of these two, and then we have that color in here. So we're just going to lay all that result on top of that color, and that's going to give us our final normal map. I'm going to leave this opacity as is for now because it's gonna change drastically, and right now it's giving us that undulation, which I still kind of want to take a look at. But what we will also do right now, I think, is just do the same thing. You know, let's leave it. Let's just look at the bump for now. So we've got our colors all hooked up. Everything seems to be fine. So let's publish it out. And play it. Yeah, so you're starting to get, it's no longer, this surface is no longer completely smooth. And this is where, this is kind of one of the reasons why I ended up putting a variable on that blur, was because, you know, sometimes you want it subtle, sometimes you want it a bit more choppy. And that was one of the ways that you know, the end user can change that. But I think that this could be way more intense. Oh, yeah. So, you know what? Let's just make it 20 and see what happens. That's better. That's too much now, but you can see how that that underlying noise mask we had is now acting as a normal, which is what we want. We can go ahead and expose that blur right now. So let's make another parameter. And where are we? I'm not used to having this thing here, so I get lost in my own menu system. Okay, so let's call this ripple blur. And the label is going to be blur. No, B-L-U-R. And the group is ripples. So this, we're going to have to change the defaults. I think, what did we have now? We currently have 3, so we're going to want it higher than that because we know we're not happy with it. So let's set the initial default as, let's call it 5. And then we'll make this max a lot bigger. So we'll give ourselves a lot of leeway. And then we have to expose. So now, once I make the, oh my goodness, I'm losing my words. I'm making my instance parameter first, and then I'm going to expose it here. I go expose, and I've already got what I want. So I just go down this list, click ripple blur, and that's now been exposed. Right, so let's see what that looks like, and we can play around with that bump somewhat, because we're not going to use a height map for that, because that's just going to interfere with the height map. Okay, that's already a little bit better. Now don't forget that there's going to be another layer on top of this. But let's take a look at that blur. So we can blur it out a little bit, and we're going to play with all the the frequency and all that stuff. But we just kind of wanted we wanted basically right, and build it up slowly so that you kind of get one section more or less squared away before you do the next one. I don't know, it looks kind of weirdly pixelated to me. I think we're going to have to add a blur onto that normal map like we did on the other one. I think that actually worked really well. Let's try that. So again, we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to get a blur. Actually, no, we want this. I'm trying to make them even so they make sense. I'm going to blur. What did we set this one at? About 4.5. So let's do the same thing here and see how that works for us. Yeah, I like that a lot better. All right. So yeah, that's looking pretty good. I think we're at 20 minutes. I think we've got enough done here that we can probably break and pick this up in the next video. So again, just to review, we have this fluid which itself is moving. We're blurring it a little bit. We're running it through essentially so far more or less the same pixel processor function that we have up here, but we're going to change that even more, so it's going to look even better. But what we did just by changing the amplitude and the frequency, it already looks like a completely different thing. And we're just starting to kind of stack these little guys up. I like to be neat and clean. Because not so much that I'm a neat freak, but it just makes life a whole lot easier if you kind of get an whatever your organization is, just try to keep it organized. And it's once these things get really big, it makes it a lot easier to find stuff that you're looking for. Okay, so we're going to break here, and then we'll pick it up in the next video.